What is the world's most evil company and why? I don't like Manulife Financial. After I spent a few months being a pregnancy relief receptionist at death and disability claims in the 90s. It was not good. Everything you might suspect about insurance is true. It's ugly and vile and inhuman and absurd. When I left it was before my contract was up. With a stolen file. And with a threat to the manager that, if this dude whose file I'd pilfered, didn't call me with the news money was in his account by 7 PM. I'd take all of this shit to the media. John, I'll always remember you. The accident that destroyed your wrist in the mine. The one that was covered. The helicopter ride to the local major metropolitan hospital to fix it. The car accident with a muse 2 months later that bent the metal pins to a 90 angle. And the fact MF said they wouldn't cover this new helicopter ride because they'd already paid for a helicopter ride. The part where we forced you to prove you were disabled every month for $75 a pop. Until we changed the number on the form and didn't let you know. And you called. A 55-year miner weeping because his 16-year daughter stopped eating lunch and you didn't have another 75. You'd filled out the form we sent you, but it was wrong before it arrived. So you called and said you were headed out to the wood shack and would just take the duck in hand off at the wrist. So I did what I did. And you had the disability payment you had bought and were owed by the time we spoke that evening. I never went back. And when my placement agency called and tried to braid me for unprofessional behavior, I told them to never ever send me to a company that was actively ripping off and trying to kill their clients. I worked for Blue Cross for about 6 months and then I found out they had a coverage denial group. They looked for any and every way to deny large claims. So mostly people in traumatic and catastrophic situations and cancers. They touted themselves as being non-profit while the CEO made millions a year and came to the office in a ducking helicopter. Duck health insurance companies. My husband almost died because the insurance company he paid shitloads of money to denied him a new insulin pump for the type 1 diabetes he's had since childhood. That keeps him alive. I'm a little biased since I just saw Dark Waters but DuPont. Amway. Most fast fashion brands. Child labor. Wasting horrible amount of water while polluting it. Burning or throwing the unsold clothes into the ocean, etc. I can't help but thinking that all mainstream products in the world are built on top of suffering. And that anything remotely ethical is just extremely expensive and scarce. It's completely down to money. End of story. Did you know that over 90% of everything you recycle doesn't actually get recycled? That only 20-30%, depending on where you read, of all cardboard actually gets recycled, as in properly used again. That the cost of buying new cardboard for companies now is cheaper than recycling it or buying recycled cardboard. That recycling companies like Buffer sell their recycling by the ton and were caught mislabeling nappies, sanitary towels and clothes marked as waste paper, which is cheaper of course. Recycling is a business. And like all businesses, profits are all that matter. We need to wake up to the fact that buying an electric car, replacing your light bulbs, buying bags for life, eating less meat, it's all a puny drop in the ocean, even if you combined everyone doing it, because 100 companies produce 71% of the world's total pollution. We want change, but nobody really cares enough. We want renewable energy, yet deny the construction of clean and efficient nuclear power plants. We deny the construction of wind farms as it'll spoil the view and reduce your house price. Why the duck hasn't anyone built a sea of solar panels in deserts? Oh yeah, money. And how difficult it is, because that requires money to transport said energy to the world. But a single massive farm the size of a city could provide enough solar energy for the entire world's requirements. If done correctly, we have the means. We just don't care enough or want change. Because change costs money, and none of you will accept the increased cost of your next bullshit iPhone or clothes or food. Because the current, vastly polluting methods of getting those goods are cheaper and keep the costs down for the consumer. I live in New York City, where we have a plastic bag ban, which I guess is fine, but compliance is inconsistent. Anyway, I learned recently that one paper bag like from a grocery store takes up something like 6 times as much space as a plastic bag when being packed and shipped. So while a paper bag itself may be better for the environment, recyclable, biodegradable, whatever, the carbon footprint of the supply chain is also pretty substantial. The three credit bureaus, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. Your ability to get loans for cars, houses, etc. depends on your credit history they collect, but they are notorious for having mistakes as a result of fraud or otherwise, and customer service that's so terrible that it is sometimes impossible to correct mistakes in your credit history record. Plus, in 2017, Equifax had the personal information data breach that included social security numbers and is the reason it's recommended that you get your credit history frozen. Now, if you want to apply for a loan, you have to go through the hassle of unfreezing your credit history first at all three credit bureaus. At one time, they charged you to do this. I'm not sure if it's true, but I heard that each company has stakes in the other two. So, they are basically trying to financially benefit from the data breach. I don't use the word hate very much, but, edit, thanks for all the upvotes everyone. I wanted to clarify, it seems a common misconception. When I refer to freezing, I'm referring to your credit history, not your score. Your history continues to build, and your score continues to change accordingly as you pay or not pay your bills, apply for credit cards, and loans. Regardless of whether it's frozen or not, when your history is frozen, nobody, including you, can use it to apply for a loan, mortgage, or a credit card. These are called hard pulls of your credit score, which can negatively affect your score when performed, especially multiple times in a short time period. Lenders find it to be risky behavior, so the bureaus dock your score. Soft pulls of your credit score, like when you check your score on a website or app, don't affect your credit score. I'm not a financial professional, so make sure to take my words for what they are. But I recommend that everyone freeze their credit history at all three bureaus as soon as possible. That way nobody can use your personal info to apply for things that can affect your credit score. Then, thaw it only during the time period people need to do hard pulls from it, then freeze it again. This all can be done online, if you're lucky, but we are all at the mercy of 3 for-profit companies to care for our precious credit history and personal information, and they have done an awful job at it this far, impacting people's lives in terrible ways, as commentators have made it clear. The fact that Equifax still exists after that is criminal. Pretty much every adult in the United States had all of their info leaked. Link. JJ knew for decades that asbestos lurked in its baby powder. Edit link. Dopasic focuses on the epicenter of America's struggle with opioid addiction across the US. 3 and specifically the drug OxyContin. Good 8-ep series about Honor the Most Evil Company. I checked some of the stuff they did because it was unreal to me. I was just naive. Link company that was owned by the Sackler family. Scrolled this far just to find JJ mentioned. It was unbelievable how long they kept this under wraps despite reports from way earlier regarding how carcinogenic their powder was turning out to be, especially increasing incidence of ovarian cancer in women. Lots of good examples here. Find it interesting that nobody mentioned McKinsey, which advises most of these firms on their corporate strategy. Chiquita Bananas, I'm not sure if they're that evil currently, but they have a really bad history of killing protesting workers, starting wars and supporting terrorist organizations. Link. The term Banana Republic came from their relations with nations like Honduras. Was looking for this. Kinda crazy that the clothing brand Banana Republic became so popular despite this morbid allegiance. And yet my clothing brand fascist empire hasn't really taken off yet. Or my made for kids by kids line. Purdue Pharma. OxyContin is still killing people. But hey, bonuses for selling by the milligram. Evil. Nike is the largest slave labor company in the world. I've scrolled so much and hasn't seen anyone mention this, but Chevron. They were found guilty in America and were ordered to pay. The lawyer who represented the victims is currently sitting in jail in the US. Edit, here's an article on it. Link. I love how London Oil and its leadership would literally qualify for the bad guy role in narrator's action movie. Georgia ruins small businesses and destroys the sense of community in rural towns. All the companies who are gobbling up real estate so they can rent the houses out for insane rates while also neglecting their landlord responsibilities. Let's look at what happened with Zillow last week. Bought 6,000 houses by paying too much for them. It's probably some little known company that isn't high profile but is basically pure slavery while supplying the bigger companies that we actually know about. I'd also nominate security contractor companies that supply death squads and death squad training to dictators around the world. What they do is often technically illegal in the countries they are based in, but enforcement just doesn't happen as long as they are assisting governments their home government supports. Blackwater. Nestle is pretty bad, charging African villages for water. The far worse thing that they did was give milk formula to poor African women for free just long enough for them to stop producing milk, and then start charging them for the formula, tricking them into giving up something they produce naturally, and then charging them to save their babies. You forgot the worst part. The water they would use to mix with the formula was very low quality, and as a result of that there were many infant deaths. They also were not providing formula in enough quantity or regularity, so women began to ration it, using less scoops of formula to water ratio and starving their babies. Women couldn't afford the formula and would water it down. They also didn't have access to clean water or methods to sterilize bottles. Nestle knew that. It's hard to know how many kids Nestle killed with their fake nurses and one free can of formula as women left the hospital, but estimates put it at about 1 million. They were happy to sell a few cans to poor women at the outset and didn't care when their babies died from unclean water and malnutrition while their own mother's milk supply dried up. Nestle has a string of scandals and each one is horrifying, and Nestle doesn't care. They recently beat charges of child slavery, not by arguing they don't use child slaves, mind, but by arguing that their child slaves are in another country and US slavery laws don't apply. Duck M. I mean, Church of Scientology is pretty sketchy and started by a science fiction writer who said he was going to make up a religion. My co-worker's son was obsessed with celebrities and moved to LA to try and become an actor. Him and a couple of his friends joined the cult. Why? Because Tom Cruise and other actors were members. So a portion are joining not because they believe in the religion aspect. They just want to be part of a club that movie stars are part of. Bayer is pure evil. Selling HIV contaminated drugs link until they got busted. Then they just sold it in Africa, hoping the first world wouldn't care. Wells Fargo. Wow. Didn't know about this. From Wikipedia link. The Wells Fargo account fraud scandal is a controversy brought about by the creation of millions of fraudulent savings and checking accounts on behalf of Wells Fargo clients without their consent. They created a credit account without my consent almost 10 years ago. I called asking about it since I'd never had a credit card. Was told to make an appointment to speak with someone at one of their branches. I never did. Next thing I know, there's a new credit card in my mailbox. I've been with a credit union for a long while now, mostly because of politics, but partly because of the scam. Duck WF. To be honest, corporations are like politicians. Finding a decent one is the exception. It would be faster to list the few who aren't evil. Nestle. Literally trying to steal all water and sell it back at a huge profit. Along with basically owning slaves, they are just straight up evil. Shell is about to start blasting the wild coast of South Africa to find oil. It's during whale migration season as well. Every 30 seconds, 24 hours a day for 6 months they will blast sound waves at the ocean floor. The ocean wildlife is going to be destroyed. Cargill is pretty underestimated. They engage in child slavery. They sold poison seeds in Iraq that killed hundreds of people, and they sometimes sell infected meat. It also is really intransparent, as it is not publicly traded. So like all you guys are going on about Nestle, but have you ever heard about Cargill? Cargill makes Nestle look like a good guy in comparison. This company has the power to single-handedly eradicate hunger and deforestation, but chooses not to, so that food is a scarce commodity, making it a marketable object. They also are directly involved in something like 90% of every agricultural good you interact with daily. Clothes on your back, food for breakfast, lunch, dinner, blankets you keep yourself warm with, etc. Facebook. They knowingly created an algorithm that boosted content with angry reactions, which in turn disseminated misinformation that has cost lives and created divisions between people, our friends and family. Whatever controversial view Uncle Bob held is being shoved right in our faces. They have perpetuated the process of dividing us between young and old, rich and poor, black and white, left and right, liberal and conservative. And they did it all because more clicks, more money in their pockets. Duck Facebook. Tobacco companies.